I'm Hugh Ritchie and a farmer in Hawke's Bay, New Zealand. 14 years ago I did a Nuffield scholarship and looked at various options around reduced tillage. One of those options was looking at a thing called strip tillage. Various iterations of it happened on the farm and we eventually came back to what we do now. The reason we went in that way was, one, trying to reduce cultivation, and especially sweet corn. We could not establish good crops of sweet corn direct drilled, and equally squash and some of the more sensitive crops like beans we don't believe would be that well served by direct drilling. So a little bit of cultivation is useful. Just to give us the maximum amount of grazing, we graze livestock over the winter. As you'll see behind us, band spraying out the strips, and we need at least 6 weeks of burn down to give the roots a good chance to break down before we go in and use the strip till rig to basically cultivate those strips and leave everything else undisturbed. We built a very cheap and cheerful band spray rig on an old weeder. So we just use an air inducted nozzle about 6 inches off the ground on a wheel that's on a parallelogram, so the wheels just follow the ground contour and the nozzle just sits behind the wheel spraying as it goes. Well, in the worst case scenario, we've actually had ewes and lambs grazing this while we've been planting. Wouldn't say that's ultimate, but it's possible. And when we're doing peas, beans, double crop for instance, one pass after the peas have been out and we can then sow, precision plant beans on top. We have to be a little bit careful with some of the chemical control because obviously we haven't got nice clod-free seed beds that some of the pre-emerged herbicides work on. But we do find not cultivating between the rows doesn't give us quite the weed explosion we get, so we're now looking more at band spraying effectively around the foot of the plant with drop nozzle booms. That gives us a very good control. Prior to sowing, we'll then burn the rest of the paddock down, and then that gives us pretty good weed control for the inter-row areas. We can vary the widths between 500 centres and out to 1.5 metres, so we can do a range of different row crops. When we first started this, we did side-by-side comparison. We strip tilled 30 hectares twice and used 130 litres of diesel. We ploughed 30 hectares and we used 600 litres of diesel just for the ploughing, so before any cultivation. So significant savings. But like all these things, soil type does have an impact, but basically the big tractor that's pulling it's burning about 55 litres an hour. If it's working hard on the strip till and in sort of silt clay soils, it does work hard. In the peatier soils where it's operating at the moment, probably down around 35 to 40 litres an hour. We started with a DMI, which was basically just like a plough skeeth or coulter in front of a leg, which had a larger foot at the bottom of a very narrow shank, and so effectively you get shattering and exploding under the ground, which bursts up. A couple of gathering discs at the back to bring all that shatter back into the row, and then a cage basket at that. The seedbed might not be quite as good as it could be, but the reality is that if we don't stop hammering the soil, it's never going to have a chance to recover if you're going to carry on cropping. So the only option is to stop cropping and put it into grass or pasture and leave it for a while. We've found that by using the strip tillage and reducing the cultivation and the powered implements, we can actually regain good soil quality. We did a processed pea crop which was harvested in the wet, and we put a bean crop in which was also harvested in the wet. That was strip tilled into the peas, and we took some VSAs in the autumn, late autumn, on the headlands of that crop paddock. And then we took a VSA off the fence line, and pretty much the visual soil assessments were the same for the fence line as the headland. I'm pleasantly surprised that we are having that sort of benefit on the soil. The foot that the Orthman uses, but a very similar design to most of them. You can see the bigger foot that does the lifting and the heaving, and then a reasonably narrow shank. And we normally run them about sort of 6 to 8 inches in the ground. Most of the annual maintenance at the moment is sort of seasonal maintenance. I mean, it's actually a pretty robust machine. We haven't had to go through and really do a major thing. it does quite a lot of contracting in country that hasn't been worked before, so we've tended to find tree roots and pieces of concrete generally bend enough legs so that by the time we replace those all through the season, we've actually probably done most of the maintenance already. So at the moment we're waiting for a shipment of parts to come in, but basically going to a slightly heavier leg. It's instead of inch by 3 inch leg, it'll be an inch by 4 inch leg, so hopefully we'll have a little bit more robustness in. This wheel is actually the controlling influence on the height of this beam, so that's fixed to the ground, so that fixes this to the ground, and then all these individual pieces can be set according to what you want. So if you want to really build up your berm, you put these in deep. If you want to go deep with the leg, you can put that in deep. If you don't need to shift the residue, or you wanted to do a second pass, for instance, you wouldn't want the residue managers in, so you lift them up out of the way, otherwise you'd end up with trenches. So that's where this unit works very well, because once this is fixed, everything else is adjustable in relation to the ground height. And you're not going to get much better structure than that, really. You've got ground. Nice nutty structure. Good penetration through the soil. There's a few lumps in there, but residue managers on the plant has just knocked those out of the way anyway. Well, obviously if it gets, if the soil structure is poor and it's rock hard and bone dry, then it's pretty tough going. And the other extreme is it's too wet and it will just smear. So you can usually get a pretty good gauge from the cage roller. If the cage roller is sticking or getting anything building up in it, then you're probably in too wet conditions. To be fair, I like it for maize as deep as we can get it, and generally what we do is shallow it up until we're avoiding the stumps. So what have we achieved? We certainly achieved a lot. We've reduced to about a third of the area cultivated. By January, if you go through the maize paddock, the maize ground, walk through the crop, you would be convinced the paddock had been cultivated with the earthworm casks and the churning. All the grass is gone. It just looks like it's been cultivated. So, we find the system has worked very well. So reduced cultivation. I mean, we're probably doing most of our maize country now at about 10 litres a hectare fuel consumed.